But I want to get into an issue right now that we're dealing with. I lived in Iran 10 years, okay? And whatever we turn on right now, we're seeing Israel, Palestine. A couple months ago was Ukraine, Russia. Now it's Israel, Palestine. Everyone's talking about it. It's a issue that's very disturbing. When we saw the video of people coming down and then what they did at that rave, the party, and then you're seeing the videos, the kidnapping, all that stuff taking place. And then the numbers came out today, 8,500 on the Palestinian side, on what Israel has done. You got 1,500 on the Israeli side. It's a very complicated situation here because on one end, you're seeing how many billionaires are pulling money out of giving money to Harvard. I mean, that's where you went to, Yale. That's also where you went into, and Penn and all these different universities. What are you guys doing? How come you're not supporting this? You're supporting Palestine. You're quiet about it. And then on one end, I'm sitting there asking a question saying, how did Netanyahu not know? If you got the best secret intelligence in the world, Mossad, how did you not know this was going to take place? And the other question becomes, how Egypt, why are you not taking, refugees to come to your country? What do you know about your neighbor that the rest of us don't know? These are two questions that we can both entertain. But this is the question I had for you. I feel the Democrats have owned the black vote for decades, that they feel like no matter what they do, they are always going to get the black vote. That's kind of how they treat them. So a lot of blacks are not happy about it, but guess what? Every year, 84 to 88% vote Democrat. I get a feeling that Netanyahu or Israel, this is a question a lot of people are thinking about, including myself, sees the Americans as the same way. America's got our back. We can do whatever we want to do, and they're going to always have our back. Matter of fact, even in a private conversation that he was having in 2001, I want to play this clip. He's having a conversation with a couple people. This has been reported on by WAPO in 2010. Al Jazeera, I want to say in 2001, and all over the place. If you don't mind paying attention to this video, and then I'll ask the question. Here's Netanyahu privately having a conversation in 01. Go ahead, Robin, play it.
שהמחיר יהיה כבד מנשוא, כרגע המחיר לא כבד מנשוא. על התקפה רבת היקף על הרשות הפלסטינית. להביא אותם לפחד שהכל מתמוטט. לא פוחדים, צוחקים להם, יראו לנו לתוך הישב וצחוק ופשוט הם לא פוחדים לצחוק. זה מה שמביא אותם ואז רגע, אבל אז שוב פעם העולם יגיד מה, אתם פורשים? אתה לא מפחד מהעולם, ביבי. במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה לא שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, ולהזיז לכיוון הנכון. הוא לא יכניעו לו. אז שאני אנחנו עושים איזה משהו, אז הם... יש עליה, אז נניח שהם אומרים משהו. אז אמרו, 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בנו. זה אבסורד.
80% of Americans support us. It's absurd. We can kind of get what we want out of them. So this is my concern. I'm America first. I live here. My kids live here. My kids are in Florida because I feel the safest here. I don't mind my allies having good relationships with me. I'm okay with my allies. I have a problem with my allies using me as a card to abuse that get-out-of-jail card, and then eventually this thing can turn around and lead into World War III, because World War I, 90 million people died. 2, 60 million people died. If the third one happens at that trajectory, it's 200 million people. Do you think Netanyahu is kind of using a get-out-of-jail card to do what he wants to do and what he's been wanting to do with Palestine all these years?
No, look, I don't think, I think you pointed out, how does, they have the best security in the world, and yet this is a massive attack on their civilian population. So my sense is in Israel is that the public is very disenchanted with the government. I think they view it as having been a big problem that this happened. And so I think they're now in a situation where they have to say, okay, you have this group in the Gaza Strip, which, by the way, is not occupied territory. Israel pulled out in 2006. They elected Hamas, and I think that's been a big mistake because most of the capital goes into the terrorist infrastructure. But I think they're in a situation where you can't live with that type of a threat right on your border, and so they have to deal with it. I don't think it's a question of America get out of jail free. I think honestly they're going to do what they're going to do. We've been a strong ally of theirs and vice versa over the years, but we've deployed troops all over the world. We've never deployed troops there. They've always fought with their own army. So I think I don't think it's a question of manipulating America. I think it's you have the American people by and large have affinity for Israel. Largely, I think more from in our Christian community than anything, just based on the history of the Judeo-Christian tradition and how it's informed this country. So I think it is unique in terms of the affinity that our country country has for Israel because of the biblical history and people's adherence to the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yeah, earlier today he said, this whole thing about ceasefire, I don't know if you saw that or not, where he's like, look, we're not going to ceasefire. Did America ceasefire with Pearl Harbor? Did America ceasefire with 9/11? Did America ceasefire? We're not going to either, right? Which, by the way, I understand his position. My concern isn't his position. My concern is this going so extreme where it backfires. You're seeing what happened at airports yesterday in Russia. I'm sure you saw that clip. It's all over the place. What do we do to prevent this from coming back in our soil? I'm a product of Iran. I lived in Iran 10 years, and I remember when Jimmy Carter's like, well, human rights, the Shah's got to get rid of these 3,000 political prisoners. He did. And then Al-Qaeda and, Osama bin Laden, all this thing came out of it. 10, 20, 30 years later, we got a 9/11 here. So are you worried the position he's taking could have some residual effects that come to America?
I don't think it's because of that. I am worried about terrorism in America largely because of what our own government has done to let people in illegally from all around the world. You've had people, almost 8 million have come in. We know people have come in from China, Russia, Middle East, all these places. 140 people on the terror watch list that our own government acknowledges.
Yep.
I mean, so you figure there's a lot more than that. And if you look at 9/11, part of the reason that happened was a failure of the immigration system, too. I mean, those people they weren't here on valid visas, or they had their visas expired, the hijackers. So my fear is just you have so many people that have flooded in. Some of them are part of the drug cartel. Some of them just want to work. Some of them are criminal aliens. And then some of them, I think, would be potential terrorists. And I think there's going to be a terrorist attack in this country that we're going to be able to trace back to the border. And so I look at it and say, okay, you got to protect your own people first and foremost. Territorial integrity of your country must be enforced. You can't just let the inmates run the asylum. And I think what we're seeing in some of these places in Europe, in some of these areas, is they had immigration policies that were bringing people in that didn't want to assimilate. My view is like nobody has a right to come to America, of course, illegally, but even legally. It's a privilege to be able to do that. The two things that has to be is you got to believe in this country's ideals, and you got to want to assimilate. I don't think it's helpful to bring in massive numbers of people that are going to try to bring foreign cultures in, and that's I think what's happened. There's no-go zones in France and in Britain and some of these places. That's not a recipe for success. So I think Europe's going to have a very difficult time with these tensions bubbling up. I think we have the ability to still be smart about what we're doing here in the United States and avoid some of what they've walked themselves into.
I just hope and pray that this thing doesn't get ugly. I know you got 3 kids. I got 4. We, when you think from your kid's perspective, it's a little bit concerning when you're seeing this is not calming down. It's getting worse, and it's like at a bar. It's like, what'd you say? What'd you say? And everybody's like, did you see what he said? And it's just getting more and more and more heated. And we got to kind of figure out a way to bring it down.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.